Hello folks, welcome to this special episode of Mark's Day's Creative Differences. Bit different this time, it's a live show that we recorded in the Staines Library Hub as part of the Escalate Arts Festival, and my special guest was Julie Wassmer, author of the Whitstable Pearl Mysteries and also a TV writer on shows like Eastenders. So let's jump right into the action with a special jingle created by Dominic Currie. Welcome to Mark's Day's Creative Differences, a monthly live stream where I talk to writer friends about the little things that make a big difference to their creative process and careers, and I hope we give readers some insight into the creative process and writers and creative folk some practical advice they can actually use. And we're live in the real world for the first time. We're in the Staines Hub as part of the Escalate Arts Festival, and I have a very special guest. My guest was born in the East End of London, has worked on several TV series, including ITV's London's Burning, Channel 5's Family Affairs, and Eastenders, which she wrote on for, we were talking about this in the car up, we're not sure if it's 15 or 20 years, somewhere in between. In 2015, her debut crime novel, The Whitstable Pearl Mystery, was published, and the 11th book in the series, Murder at St Alfred's, is coming in June. The books have also been adapted into a hit TV series, which is now in its third season. It's only Julie Wassmer. Julie, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Julie, thank you so much for coming today. We're in a library. I love libraries. What do libraries mean to you?
We're in a spectacular library here at Staines. When I saw that it was dubbed Staines Library Hub, for some reason I thought it was just going to be a little place, but it's like a vast university, and libraries mean an awful lot to me because, as you say, I was born in the East End and I grew up there in the 50s and 60s, and I was an only child, so often I was what you'd call a latchkey kid. You know, my parents were both working and I would leave school, and sometimes if they were late back for work, I would go to my public library because it was a safe environment. And that's what libraries still are for kids. By the time, in many ways, I think if I hadn't had that public library in the East End, in Tower Hamlets, as a kid, I might not even have become a writer. Oh, yeah, me too. Because that was my access to books, really. You know, we had, my dad bought, he signed up to buy encyclopedias at one point, the Book of Knowledge, which we had, but we didn't have books at home, and that was my access to literature, and I was there all the time. So I remember very clearly when I was about 12, it was a very rainy summer, and I went through the entire selection of Agatha Christie, right. And that's when I really got into crime fiction, and then moved on to the American writers like Raymond Chandler, and all through the golden age of detective fiction like Dorothy L. Sayers, etc. But the library really was a fantastic refuge for me. So in my very first job when I left school, and what I did was I left school after O-levels and then went later to do A-levels at a college and then went to university. But I left school at 16 or 17, and my first job was as a junior librarian in Whitechapel Library.
Nice.
And Whitechapel Library was known as the University of the Ghetto because at that time there was a very strong Jewish community there. Many people who had escaped the horrors of concentration camps, and a lot of people, celebrated people. I mean, remember Jacob Bronowski, who made the Ascent of Man TV series? It was groundbreaking, you know. He actually taught himself English there. Really? In the library. Arnold Wesker, the playwright, he went to the boys' version of my school. It was in a separate building, but he spent a lot of his childhood there. Also, there was an artist, Mark Gertler. He used to go there and draw. And the poet, Bernard Copps, he said that he had educated himself in the covers of books at Whitechapel Library. And he wrote a poem about the library in which he said, a line of which was something like, the door to the library is a door into me. And I felt very much the same. So I felt really privileged to work there at that time. So libraries have a special meaning for me, and I've campaigned long and hard for libraries to remain funded for the community for all those reasons. And also, you know, because people who don't have access to computers, for example, can learn skills here, literary skills. There are a friend of mine, Richard Stainton, who's sadly no longer with us, but he used to campaign with me for libraries, and he said public libraries are the marker of a civilised community, and, you know, long may they remain so.
Fantastic. I mean, that's why this is a hub. I think it's part of the community hub, and they were very important to me growing up as well. So yeah. You mentioned Arnold Wesker. First play I ever did outside of school was I'm Talking About Jerusalem,
wow,
which is one of his plays. I even remember the first line. Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, it all ties up. If you keep talking, you find all these connections, don't you?
Let's talk about these amazing books, the Whitstable Pearl Mysteries. Now, you're up to this is book 11.
Book 11.
The allotment is out now. That's book 10. Yeah. When you started out with these, Whitstable Pearl Mystery, now a TV show, you know, what were your ambitions for that book and that series?
Well, it was weird because, as you say, I've been writing for TV drama for a very long time, and I had become, quite honestly, I'd become jaded with it, because although you're you know, very nicely rewarded financially, what happens is that you become separated from people. I spent most of my time locked in my office. So one of the reasons I became a writer is because I'm fascinated by people and I want to write about people. I never saw anyone in the end. And I happened to write a memoir called More Than Just Coincidence, which was published in 2010. And it was my first experience of having a book published. And it was so easy compared to writing Eastenders and other TV series, because when you write for television, you have an army of people coming forward, reading your script, giving you their notes, and then you change it and you change it. And sometimes on Eastenders we would go to 9, 10 drafts, go back to the beginning, and it was really tiring. You know, you'd be constantly given these different deadlines. And the amazing thing about writing my memoir was I got hardly any notes. It was astounding. It was just a joy. You know, I got to the end and thought, what's going to happen now? And nothing happened. The book got published. So I thought, this is so wonderful. And I thought, I'm going to try and write the crime book that I had always wanted to write from first reading those crime novels, the Agatha Christie's in the local public library, but that I also felt that I could write once I had moved to Whitstable in 1999 from London and walked down the High Street and Harbour Street and ended up in the old Neptune pub and the harbour. I mean, literally, my husband and I stumbled across Whitstable. We got lost. We were on our way to Broadstairs to have fish and chips, where we'd been once before, and I was navigating in the car, and we ended up in Whitstable, and we were about to buy the flat beneath us in Peckham in London, and my husband's a builder. He was going to turn the house back into a single dwelling. And from the old Neptune pub, after a couple of pints of Guinness, I called the broker, the mortgage broker, and said, look, we're in Whitstable, that mortgage that you've approved, if we can find a place down here for the same money, do you think we can transfer it here? He said, sure. So we came back on that Friday, found our house, and we've been there ever since. But I knew as soon as I walked down Harbour Street and everywhere there, that it was the perfect location for a crime novel. So that's, after I wrote the memoir, I thought, why don't I have a go at trying to write the crime novel that I felt was in me? And so I did, and I wrote the Whitstable Pearl Mystery, but I had no idea really how fiction publishing worked. I just thought I had an agent for my TV work, and I'd had her for a long time. I thought, she's the one that will find me a publisher, and hopefully somebody will just pick up the book. I didn't realise then that actually what most publishers do, and you know this, Mark, because you worked in publishing previously, is they usually commission you for at least 2 books. So I was quite astonished that then my publisher at that time, Constable and Robinson, who subsequently got kind of swallowed up by Little Brown, who got swallowed up by Hachette, and that's another story about publishing. They gave me a 3-book deal. So I thought, fantastic, I'm going to bring out 3 books. But I suddenly started thinking, I've got to start thinking of this as a series and not a single book. And so I need to put my Eastenders hat on and, realise that the ending of the first book is really my cliffhanger. Yeah. And although these are quintessentially crime mysteries, they're whodunits. So at the end of each book, I'm going to be serving up to my readers a denouement, the unravelling of the mystery in which the culprit is identified. I need something else for a cliffhanger, and that was the relationship between Pearl Nolan, my private eye, the local private eye, and the police detective, DCI Mike Maguire, who's based in Canterbury. And so their will they, won't they love affair forms the cliffhanger, really, of the books. And so it was then a case, I began with the summer book, which was absolutely fine, all timed around Whitstable's Oyster Festival. But then I decided the next book would be spring-based, it would be Christmas book, Murder on Sea, and the next book would be spring-based. I was thinking of, the calendar. And then I realised that the first book had come out in July or June. They wanted the next book ready for October to come out at Christmas, and the next book similarly to be done by February to come out in May. So I suddenly found myself with 2 books to write in about 8 weeks. I don't know how I did it, but I did it.
But certainly with, speaking from my own experience in publishing and my own books as well, 3 is the magic number with the series. I think once you've got 3 out and they're doing well, people will go, oh, I'm looking for a new series. So was it from book 3 that it started picking up, or was it a hit straight away? How did it pick up for you over time?
Yeah, well, by the time Mayday Murder came out,
that's the third one.
The third one, yes. They were really popular locally, and Whitstable is a very small community. If you don't know, I know some people here today know Whitstable, but I think word got around quite quickly within Kent, and I was never aware that locally around Canterbury and all the little environs, there are so many groups that meet, not just book groups, but women's groups, various retirement groups. And I found myself doing loads and loads of talks. Right. So the books were sort of, they were a hit locally. And then the publisher went for more. So I was then commissioned for another 2. Mm-hmm. And then my agent, the more successful they became, my agent started to say, we're only signing for 1 now, in case there was, more money to be had with a new deal. Yeah, yeah. But at the beginning, it was just fantastic. And then what happened was the books began to be optioned by a production company as a prospective TV series, and that was just really exciting, because once that happened, the publisher knew there was a strong chance that it would actually reach TV. Yeah.
Were you ever, with all your TV experience, ever tempted to get more involved with the TV and the writing of it, or were you just happy with the books? I
was really happy to just take a back seat, actually. I recognised that by the time, the first book came out in 2015. By the time the books began to be optioned, it must have been about, say 2020 at least. That meant I hadn't written anything for TV for some considerable time. Right. And with a new TV series, they always want, as a lead writer, someone who's hot. And I was so cold. I was cryogenic, and my last episode of EastEnders went out in 2008. So I was a wet fish, really. And, TV, as you know, Mark, it's not just the productions company that's involved, it's the broadcaster, which in these books was a company called Acorn TV. And people here think, who on earth is Acorn TV? Is it something to do with Acorn Antiques, or, you know? But they're actually a huge company in America, part of a company called AMC that made Breaking Bad. So they had to be satisfied with the writing team, and I don't think they would have been very satisfied with the writer of the books, who hadn't written anything for about 10 years, but also because I was a TV writer, I could have been all over it and caused problems for them, I think.
Well, I guess also you're going back into that mire where you're getting notes from everyone as well, which if you got your book, it's you and the editor, copy editor, proofreader, that's kind of it. And you still have final say over everything, whereas with TV it can be taken out of your hands, can't it?
I think as well, I'd come from TV, so I knew how it worked, working on a long-running series like Eastenders. And when I first began on Eastenders, it was only going out twice a week. It was quite new. So, we had, all the writers at that time had much more kind of leverage into, moulding the characters and the storylines. I mean, at that time as well, even though BBC was a no smoking establishment, we could go in there with our cigarettes, and for the script meetings and commissioning meetings, we used to have loads of wine on the table. There'd be red wine, everybody getting completely sloshed. We could do what we wanted. It was wonderful. That people used to get really angry and insult the executives and walk out and come in the next day and say, I suppose that's me over. And they'd say, oh no, it was just the red wine talking, It was really a completely different kettle of fish. But as it became, 4 episodes a week and everything, it became like the proverbial tanker that, took forever to turn around. So everything became much more streamlined and not so creative either. But I absolutely recognise that no one was really a star on EastEnders in the writing team. There were wonderful writers working there who had, created so many wonderful characters and storylines, like Tony Jordan, who went on to have his own production company.
Red Planet, is that him?
Red Planet, yeah, and he's done amazing stuff. He was a star, but really everybody else was replaceable, and I recognised that. I'm not daft. I just knew that I was lucky to be in a position where I could continue writing, and not have to go and get a job at the co-op down the end of the road. It was wonderful. I was very grateful, and I learnt a lot too. So, but I also recognised that because of that, it was making great TV or making a great movie is a collaborative affair. And once you realise that, your place in the universe. I think if you come from always being a novelist and your books get picked up, that is probably a different thing, because you have so much autonomy as a writer. As you know, it's your book, it's your characters. You're not getting all those notes that I talked about. So I really trusted the fact that Buccaneer understood the books, knew what they wanted to do. They were really committed too. They optioned the books 3 times, which is almost unheard of. What happens is they pay the writer a fee for 18 months to have the rights to your books. And that happens to a lot of books. And then they don't get a deal, so the option lapses. But that happened 3 times, but they kept on optioning. So I knew they were really committed to the series, and I was really happy to kind of trust them and look at Whitstable Pearl, the TV series, from the audience's seat, and I've enjoyed doing that. I mean, they made me an executive producer, so I always read the scripts, and after a while I decided not to read the scripts for the last series because I was getting a bit nitpicky, right. And I don't think that really helped. I mean, I think I raised relevant points, but the episodes that I didn't like too much on script were actually really popular once they were on screen.
Yeah, so it's like it becomes its own thing after a while. I remember when I was at Orion, we had the Call the Midwife books.
Right.
And if you watch the first couple of seasons of Call the Midwife, they cleave very, very closely to the books. And then suddenly it's become this other thing, which I'm less keen on. So yeah, it evolves. And now you mentioned earlier that Whitstable seemed perfect to you when you visited there. What was it about Whitstable that made you think, murder?
Well, for a start, living in Whitstable, I think, in terms of writing books, gives you a real variety of location, because we've got the coast there, we've got the sea, or rather the estuary, but the sea really.
We call it the sea.
Absolutely. We've got, we're just on the cusp of countryside there. There's some stunning countryside, just 6 minutes down the road in the car. Beautiful cherry fields in Graveney. 8 miles down the road is the great city of Canterbury. So, for all those reasons, that's wonderful. I'm not just stuck in a precinct, as you would say, for TV drama like on Albert Square. Yeah. I've got a variety of different locations. But also, it's not really picturesque, it's not the Cotswolds or whatever. It's not Doc Martens, port, whatever it is. It's got a working harbour. It's oysters. It's grubby. There's an aggregates factory down there by the. I loved all of that. It kind of reminded me of the East End of London in a way, but it also has a very strong community, which you see straight away. Yeah. It was also an old smuggling town, so a lot of the cottages and what have you on a stretch there called Island Wall, which runs parallel to the beach. A lot of them were old fishermen's pubs that were then renovated into cottages. And that's where I put Pearl. Pearl is in one of those cottages, alongside an old oyster barge that's there, that's been renovated, and just literally that's where I placed her in my mind for the books. And I knew that with a close community like that, it kind of reminded me of what I was used to writing. Eastenders, a community where no one commutes to work. They all work curiously on Albert Square, either in the laundrette, the local pub. There's enough jobs for everyone in Albert Square, or they've got a market stall. So it has that community feel, and also that strong community is a rebellious one because of its smuggling history as well. It was anti-establishment. The more, once I moved to Whitstable, I recognised that because I campaign, not just for libraries, I'm an environmental campaigner as well, and I've campaigned for the independent shops in Whitstable to remain independent. We've stopped, a Tesco's coffee shop arriving in the high street, for example, things like that. And I knew that all I had to do was kind of send out a signal, and there would always be 200 people who would be ready to come out with a banner and fight for something that was important for the town. And so that whole thing just made me feel that I would be comfortable writing about that community and in that environment.
Brilliant. But if you hadn't had that extra Guinness, we could be talking about the Peckham kebab mysteries.
Yes, absolutely. Well, no, I don't think I would have done that. I did try to include elements of my Peckham life into Eastenders at one point, including the criminal family that lived next door. Right. But they thought it was too bizarre for words. They didn't realise it was really true. But yeah, there we go.
Well, look, let's go on to our regular questions. So with the Creative Differences podcast, I ask the same questions of my guests every time we go out. So what small thing has made a big difference to your creative process?
Oh, now, I have to say I am the least technical person in the whole world. I can't do online banking. I have to bank at that famous other building society beginning with N. We're probably not allowed to mention the names, but BBC. I have to. Well, it's a stream. Yes, good idea.
Nationwide.
God
bless them.
Where on a Saturday morning, I'm queuing up with all the other 60 and 70-year-olds that can't bring themselves to use online banking. But despite that, when I was really under the cosh for trying to finish the second and third books in a really, really tight schedule. My neighbour mentioned to me that my computer has a program called Dragon, which is narration.
Yes, it's dictation.
That's right, yes. Yeah. And you can dictate. And once he did that, I realised I still write in longhand, usually in my beach hut during the summer. And then I would go home and I'd have to try and read all my handwriting, scribbled, in bright sunlight, and it took forever. But then I realised that I could use this dictation programme. Yeah. And so I did. And that meant I could write those second and third books very quickly. So what I do now is I don't use Dragon, I just use my smartphone, the notepad, and at my beach hut I just I write first in longhand and I immediately dictate onto the smartphone. I come home, transfer that to a Word program, and then I have a first draft, print that off, and then I'm away. And that really has streamlined everything, because once I've got that down, then I can move on, and I'll maybe write 3 or 4 chapters that way before I even look at the printed page to then start editing. But that gives me a great sense of momentum rather than getting caught up with all of writing directly onto a computer screen I can only do if I'm writing an article, for example, or something that's non-fiction.
I'm the same, actually, yeah.
Well, that's really interesting.
Yeah, I handwrite as well, but I type it up. But I know a few authors who've used Dragon or are using their because the smartphones have caught up now with Dragon. And and they're the ones who are writing 2 or 3 books a year.
Interesting. I couldn't possibly narrate directly.
No,
like Barbara Cartland used to do that, lie on the sofa, didn't she, and narrate to her secretary, apparently. I couldn't do that.
No, I have to handwrite first.
Yes, but when you were a child at school, did you used to write like essay writing and stuff in school?
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, I'm cack-handed, so I'm left-handed, but I also write upside down.
Right.
So, which feels perfectly comfortable to me. But if I ever see photos or footage of me, I'm like, what are you doing? But it feels totally comfortable to me. But there's a direct line between the brain, what's left of it, and my hand. That is just, I just write without fear.
I absolutely appreciate that too. It's a great way to get, I mean, if any of you here today are would-be writers or you do write, I always would recommend. It's much more difficult, I think, for younger people because we're so old, Mark. No, but, you know, if you're 20 and you're only used to writing directly onto a computer screen, it's more difficult. Yeah. But I always find that it's almost like the tempo of your thought when I'm writing. Yes, yeah. You know, it just begins to write itself. It's just like that. I always write not in a notepad either. They're just sheets of paper. Okay. Just boom, 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 boom. I can get like an extraordinary amount of writing done in an afternoon. Yeah. Like, I don't know, 20, 30 pages of A4. Bring it home, and that's, you know, a couple of chapters, 2 or 3 chapters. Yeah. And the momentum is there then. That's how I can
key,
do
though, isn't it? Because the thing is, you'll turn on, you know, I don't use Word, I'm on Apple, I use Pages or Scrivener, and you've got that winking cursor on a black page, it's a blank page, it's kind of almost daring you to write something. Whereas with the notebook, because it's my dirty laundry, no one's going to see it. I will sometimes write, what's going to happen today? How do I get them out of this? But that motion of the hand moving upside down, it gets the momentum going. Once you got that going.
Yeah, I mean, I always remember as well, I've got a friend who was an Oxford University scholar in Shakespeare, and she said that once her students started to move onto writing work onto a computer, things got sloppy. And she said what happened was, she found that because it's presented so well and so professionally on the screen in front of you, people got sloppy, but when they got to the bottom of a page, it was as if that page was separate from the rest. It would roll up and there would be lots of repetitions and what have you. But if you've got everything written there before you, it's a lot easier to see and then to hone, to do the crafting bit.
Yeah. Just to go back, you mentioned writing for Eastenders. What were you using software, script writing software back then?
I was using software in the end, we all had to use first draft, final draft. But when I first started, I was typing on a
say typewriter.
A typewriter.
Oh.
I was writing on a typewriter, and of course, the reason why in a script each new scene begins on a new page was because you would otherwise have to, retype everything out. I had Tipex and all the rest of it, but otherwise you'd have to type the whole thing out. And we didn't, there wasn't any internet, so I would then have to put that in the post. And then they'd receive, so there'd be all that, maybe 3 days before you got notes. That was another reason why we didn't get many notes. But in the end, I used to use motorbike messenger service to get the scripts to Elstree. Wow. So they come hot off the typewriter, the Olivetti, with all the Tipex on them, and then go into and on the back of a motorbike messenger all the way to Elstree. And of course, once they got them, there wasn't room for any last minute changes. In the end at Eastenders, they could be filming that day and they'd be calling me and saying, we need to change this. Yeah. There was endless possibilities for change, but you couldn't do that then, no.
No, I worked for a publisher and we did Barbara Windsor's biography, and I got to drive her around for a couple of weeks, and I said, so how much rehearsal did you get for EastEnders? She went, rehearsal? They give us the script, we look at it and we're on.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it was a real production line, wasn't it?
So I think in terms of, because it was such a big deal then, to actually type up, you had to be absolutely sure that this was your final draft, this was the best you could do. Whatever it was, whatever piece of writing it was honed before it got typed. Yeah. And that's the thing, is that all the crafting went into that beforehand, and that would all be the handwritten stuff. Yeah. But everything has changed around now. Everybody, tends to use computers first, so everything's on the screen. And as I say, then you think it looks great because it's all typed up and it comes out and it's all nice font or whatever, but it's not quite right. It's not quite as honed as it should be.
Brilliant. That's question one. Going to be all afternoon. What's the thing that makes you think you're ready to start writing on a project? What's the thing that tips you over into starting the album? Yeah,
that's usually what you do need is that gut feeling, and for me it's butterflies in the tummy. It's literally a physical thing. I get excited by an idea, and then it might not be that I'm beginning to write whatever it is. It's that it's getting me to research what I want to do and to do the basic introductory work on the characters and the location. Because for me, especially with this series of books, they're very much to do with location. Once I know where the location is per book, like this, for example, is a stately home, Mount Ephraim, I begin to think of the process of what's the story about. Well, it often hosts weddings. So what's happened? Well, Pearl's been invited to an old friend's wedding, and that's what's going to happen. The murder is going to be part of the wedding. So, lots of stuff, all that introductory stuff comes really from me just thinking, oh, I've got a thrill. I want to get going on this now.
Brilliant. And how do you know when you're done, when you've finished?
Yeah, well, it's a bit easy with these, obviously, because, I mean, on a very basic level, most books are at 70,000 words, and I began with about 80,000 for the first book, Whitstable Pearl, and then they've all settled down to about 70,000 words. So I've got my word count, and I know that these have a definite format because they are whodunits. So I know that once I'm getting close to I'm asking my culprit, that's it. But in the new book, Murder at St Alfred's, what I've done is, most of the book, you can pick up any one of these books at any time. Yes. They're standalone books and you'll know where you are. But in the new book, what I've done there is I've created a double cliffhanger. Now, if any of you buy the book when it's out in June, you'll realise what I'm saying, but you'll think that you've reached the end.
Right.
because the murderer has been unmasked, and you think what's going to happen is it's all going to settle down and there's going to be just something happening between Pearl and Maguire, but there's actually something else happening, and it's something to do with the family dynamic, and it creates a whole new kind of cliffhanger for the next book. And that's the first time I've done that, so it's much more like a novel than a standard whodunit. And
do you know, I talk to a lot of crime writers. Some are the ones who have to know who the killer is before they start, and there's that. Apparently Agatha Christie got to the penultimate chapter and then thought, right, I need to figure out who my murderer is, and because she gave everyone a motive. Are either of those familiar to you? Do you know who?
Yes, very much so. Yeah, I'll often begin thinking that I know who the murderer is, right, and then change it as I go along. Right. And I don't do a lot of plotting either. I don't. I'm not a Booker Prize winning writer. I'm a storyteller. And that's what I do, and I'm used to telling stories. And like I say, Eastenders gave me great confidence and great experience in structuring stories, trying to keep your reader interested with the hook at the end of each scene, the cliffhanger at the end of each programme. I employ that with the books. But when it comes to writing these books, it's interesting because I learn every time as well. I don't want to keep boring my readers with the relationship between Pearl and Maguire. Are they or are they not going to get in together? Because with this book, Murder at St Alfred's, I didn't want to just leave the audience hanging. I mean, I can say quite clearly now that this is the church in which they are going to get married at the beginning of the book, and the murder happens, and that's basically where the crime story goes, but everything else is up for grabs. And I don't plot. I like to be told. There's horses. I can hear horses.
Horses, yeah.
Wow, there's loads of horses. This is the Grand Nationals going past the window at the Staines Library Hub. I'm describing it to you now. It's amazing. They've disappeared. No. That's amazing. Yeah. Yes, but I don't plot. I just trust my storytelling abilities. And if I think to myself, I'm writing this story, but I'm actually reading it too as I'm writing it, I think it's a bit obvious. I'll change. I'll add more complexities to the murderer.
How do you remember that idea that you have at, say, 3 a.m?
I always keep a notebook by me. I don't know. Do you use notebook?
Not by the bed. I use the phone if I have that.
Right.
Which usually ends up with a series of consonants, and I wake up in the morning and go, what?
Or your battery runs flat. That would
yeah.
No, I'm a great one for notebooks, so I write everything down. The problem is then I don't know which notebook I've written stuff down, so I'm always going through them all. But always keep a notebook beside me in bed as well, yeah.
Excellent. What's the biggest mistake you've ever made in your writing career?
Oh, in my writing career, there's, do you know, I can't think that I've made one. That makes it sound like big-headed, but I think it is just the case that I've been really fortunate. Probably that I didn't start more seriously earlier. Right. That's probably what I regret most, but I lack confidence, and I think it's really important. You know, I was on BBC Surrey yesterday, and I was saying the importance of writing is not to trust yourself. If you really have a story to tell and you want to tell it, find the confidence to do that. You know, just keep writing. You know, you'll fail, but you'll learn from your failures always. You know, don't think that I failed, so therefore I can't write. Most of us fail in the course of a story, and we have to change all sorts of things, all sorts of components to a book or a story. But I never had the confidence. And so I wrote really for me without sharing stuff. I quite liked the idea of writing articles, and I did write some articles as a young woman and send them off to women's magazines, and sometimes they were published. But believe it or not, I was quite shy, and I used to send them off in the brown paper envelope. So when they came through with the rejection letter, but with something nice there, I'd concentrate on the nice thing and think, one day I'll do that. But the idea of actually going and seeing somebody for a meeting or whatever, I just never had the confidence.
Wow. Wow. What's the best happy accident of your career?
Well, that is easily, I was working for a company called The Knowledge, nothing to do with taxi drivers, but it was a group of commercials producers who at that time, everyone had a filofax that they used, you know, for the... all
My wife still uses one, she swears by them.
Really? Is that amazing? And they had been working in the commercials industry for some years, and they decided that actually what would be really useful would be a book that people could use as the top commercials producers' filofax, with all the contacts in there that you would need to make a commercial or a film. And so they started up this book called The Knowledge, and it's still going. It had its 40th anniversary this year. The whole thing was taken over by another publisher. But I went to work for them, and I was working for them, first of all, selling advertising space for their advertisers, who were all, you know, film studios like Shepperton, or crew that worked on all top movies and things. But because they got itchy feet and they wanted to get back to producing stuff themselves, they had their own production company, and they made commercials, and one of those producers wanted to get into drama, and she saw that there was an advert for Channel 4 and British Screen, who were then the main funding body for feature films in the country then in the 90s. She saw that there was this appeal for new talent. They wanted to make 12-minute films for Channel 4, and that would also go out to the Oscars and everything, and they were all being made to the same specifications of, you know, a feature film. So going out on 35mm and with equity rates and everything, with a £90 million budget for 12 minutes. Wow. So they were looking for new writers, screenwriters, directors and producers, not actors, but, you know, because they were paying equity rates, you could get, you know, top rate actors in them. And so that producer, Tina, she asked, she knew I wrote, so she said, I know you've written short stories, do you think you could come up with an idea for a short film script? So the long and short of it was that I did do that, and she sent it off with the budget and everything, you know, all beautifully presented, and we got a rejection letter. So I thought, well, I'm used to this, I'm used to the rejection letter, blah blah blah. And then one day we were all sitting together somewhere, and she said, you'll never guess what's just happened. I said, what? She said, I've just been called by Channel 4 to go in for a production meeting about your script. And she said, but I've told them it's been rejected. And they said, oh, well, if it was a mistake. And we've always wanted to make it. Oh. So it was much better than first getting the news that they'd accepted it, because I assumed it was going to be a rejection, and it was a complete volte-face, and it got made, and it was wonderful. So that really gave me an agent and everything, just a little short film. And it was even shown at the, you know, the Oscars. It was put up for the Oscars. Wow. And, you know, she went off to Hollywood at that time, and she said she heard at one point the film running behind these curtains and producers all laughing because it was a comedy. So it was brilliant. Wow. So that was a mistake that ended up a great thing.
Fantastic. I'm going to throw it open to questions if you have any questions in just a second. Is there a character or a story swirling around in your head that you're not quite ready to write yet?
Yes, there is. I apart from writing the Whitstable Pearl Mysteries, last year I brought out a book called The Mantuary, which was about domestic abuse. It's totally different. It's set not in sunny Whitstable by the sea. It's set in Yorkshire, in the winter, and it's about domestic abuse and coercive control. Totally different, and it's a thriller. But now what I'd really like to write, having enjoyed writing Murder at St Alfred's, is it's very difficult to explain, but it's just about a woman at a certain age looking back on her life, but on one particular relationship, and it's really a relationship. It's almost a literary fiction book, but I daren't say literary fiction. Yes. Now, one reason why it might be literary fiction is because I haven't quite got the storyline right. And as Ben Aronovich says, there are no stories to literary fiction. Just beautiful prose. But yeah, I haven't got all the component features of that woman yet. And it's interesting because I was thinking about her the other day and I thought, I don't quite know where she lives, but I do now. She's living in Camberwell, not a million miles away from Peckham. Right. So now I've got her there. I know she's close to Camberwell Art School, and I'm beginning to see her moving around, interestingly. So I haven't got the full picture yet, but that's helping me.
I love that. But you've been living with her for all this time, getting to know her.
Yeah.
She's simmering away on the back burner.
Yes,
Brilliant.
absolutely. Yeah.
It's a question for both of you. You know, how long is the research process before you can just start jotting anything down?
We were chatting earlier about Murder at St Alfred's, which is set in a church. It took me, I needed to use the church organ. That took quite a bit of research, talking about the church organ. I now know more about church organs than I ever did before. But also, Mark's wife, Claire, is a bell ringer. And so I did a little bit of research on bell ringing, but I'm now dead scared that I didn't do enough, because I know that she's been very, very cross about the lack of bell ringing research in other books.
Yes.
And other bell ringers will notice.
Yes, absolutely. You're a bell ringer, right? There we go.
Everywhere.
There we go.
Yes, well, in my books are the Witches of Woodville series, which I pitch as a cross between Dad's Army and Bed Knobs and Broomsticks. So you got a little village not too far from Whitstable, but a fictional village, like a greatest hits of Kent villages during the Second World War, and you've got these bickering witches battling different supernatural threats. So I wanted to ground it in reality. So you look at the reality of rationing and what the wonderful thing about this was a period of mass observation. So you had ordinary people, mostly women, keeping diaries every day, talking about their, making dinner, their worries about, the war. And actually a lot of them, this whole idea of the war, we're all pulled together, a lot of people go, either we're going to lose this, or our government's incompetent, or they're lying to us about how many people are dying, all of that stuff. So I wanted to ground it in reality, but then sprinkle some magic on top of it as well. So I had to look into the magic side of things. I've got friends who are Wiccan and pagan, and they'd say, don't you make us look like idiots, So I wanted to get that right as well. So it's kind of blending the two. But it's, the location helps as well, being, where we are in Kent, because there's still pillboxes and airfields, and they found an unexploded bomb in a field just up the road just before Christmas, which they had to blow up. So it's still there and all around us. But then the trick is not to let the research bog down the story, because you have to leave a lot of stuff out. You just sprinkle enough just so that people feel like you know what you're on about, and then let it speak for itself. So. Yeah,
and the other thing was, I was always lucky writing Eastenders, because you always got copious police research or hospital research for any storyline that touched on all that. And of course, suddenly you're left high and dry, you're doing it all yourself now. And obviously for police research in the books, I was really, really very careful at the beginning, and consulted, Chief Constable, who gave me lots of research. In the second book, I even changed the storyline so that it was absolutely spot on with what would happen in real life. And then I became friends with another writer who is Lisa Cutts, a crime writer, who's actually a real life police detective, and she said, I wouldn't worry about that too much, look at what's on TV, it's all rubbish really, but she said you can do what you want, that's the beauty of books. So I'm now sort of freed up from that. I'm making loads of errors with the police stuff.
But yes, I forgot to mention, there is bell ringing in this as well, because Claire, and I think I'm going to name names actually, it was an MC Beaton book. We went to Brighton for WorldCon 2019, I think, and she'd been told there was bell ringing in this book, and she got so angry at how inaccurate it was. She left it at the Airbnb, and I said to her, well, my next book, if there's bell ringing in it, I'll make the bell ringers the heroes, and I'll make sure it's... So she went through this with a red pen going, no, no, no. So, and it's cropped up in Facebook bell ringing groups. People go, someone's actually got it right. I mean, it's magic, but they've actually got it right. So yeah, I've been sort of accepted into their strange world of campanology.
I mean, Mark, talking about the fact that it's based in wartime, that must have freed you up from the bane of most writers' lives about writing contemporary fiction, mobile phones.
Well, the thing is, this took about 12 years to come into fruition, because I wanted to do like a British Buffy. I wanted to have a village where strange things happen and you have these women fending it off. And I tried setting it in the here and now, and it never quite clicked. And it was only when we moved to Kent and there's all this war stuff there, and I thought, set it in the war. Which I did. Funny, it was my TV agent who said, yeah, set it in the war, they love all that. Still haven't sold the TV rights, baffling. But yeah, I set it in the war, and it gives you that little bit of remove as well, to heighten the tone a little bit as well.
The fact that we're all so connected now, closely connected by technology, is just awful for writing fiction.
You've always got to think of a reason why they can't get a phone signal.
Absolutely, and it can't just be, the battery has gone flat again.
Mind you, Canterbury, you go into Canterbury, worst phone signal ever, because they got this big cathedral and they won't let you put, a 5G thing on top. It's what Jesus would have wanted, surely.
Yes, that's true. That is true.
He'd want fast fibre broadband, wouldn't he?
It is true. I hadn't thought about that. I always think that it's because I'm in a particular shop, and they haven't got... That's what it is.
Yeah, blame Church of England. What's bringing you joy at the moment, Julie?
Apart from being here at the Staines Library Hub with these lovely people. And you. Well, this is nice. Hello over there. Well, this is the thing, isn't it? Is, writing can completely take over your life, because if you're not actually sitting there and doing it, you're thinking about doing it, or you're feeling guilty because you're not doing it, or then, what was also a big joy in my life always was reading. But now when I pick up a book, I start thinking, why am I reading this book? I should be writing the one that I met. I mean, does that happen to you?
Yeah.
It's terrible. Yeah. And also, when you're published, you get other authors' books to read, because people say, would you read my book, give me your view, or would you give me a quote for the cover? So you have a to be read pile that gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and you think, I haven't gone through all that. I mean, with one author's book, I felt so bad that I'm so late and I hadn't read. Made me laugh, made me cry, made me want more, because I thought that will fit everything. I have been thinking since that's what I should put on everyone's book.
I will point your attention to the back cover of my book, Warm, Witty, Wartime Fun, Julie Wassmer.
But that really gave me joy, and now it doesn't, reading, because for all those reasons. But what does is I went slightly bonkers throughout COVID, as I'm sure we all did, really, and I thought, when I come out of this, I need to have something that I can retreat to if this ever happens again, a lockdown period, and I end up wanting to kill my husband. And what I did was, I've got a neighbour who's wonderful. She's a pianist, and she's only ever taught small children piano. She's never taught adults. And I begged her, we became close friends throughout the COVID period. I begged her to take me on as an adult learner. She said, adult learners, so this is going to be awful. And I said, I'll work really, really hard, Barbara, I promise you. Blah, blah. And anyway, so I took up the piano in 2021. So I'm nearly up to 5 years. And I am up, she said, you're 73, Julie, it's not going to be easy. Well, I was a bit younger at the time, obviously. But I'm up to Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. Nice. And I love playing the piano. It's not a million miles removed from being at the computer keyboard. So I just come off one keyboard, I go downstairs, I do that. I'm not reading a book, I'm reading notes, I'm learning how to read music properly, and I just lose myself in that easily for 2 hours, and it gives me great joy. But it's also, I used to work on classical music programmes for BBC when I worked there as a young woman, and it's really taught me a lot about a lot of classical music that I hadn't been aware of, like Handel. So I now go to classical piano concerts as well. Yeah,
wonderful. Yeah, I've seen some videos of you playing online, and it's great. No, you're good.
With the face is all screwed up, going. And at the end, there's a huge sigh of relief. There'll be another one of those soon.
Brilliant.
Yeah, so Bisati's gymnopody. I'm just keep getting stuck on the middle bit.
Yeah,
everybody loves that. Yeah.
That's a great one.
So that's it. That's an easy one for me. That's my big joy.
So are you thinking of doing one about Whitstable? That you could all relocations using your books?
Well, I could do that. Yeah, that's a very good idea. I was mentioning to this lady here actually that you've got my postcards there with my social media handles on there and everything, but my website has a location section, so if you go to that, look for location under each book. If you go to each title, it's got photographs of lots of the locations, sometimes linked to bits of prose from the books.
People, I mean, when I went to Vienna, I sort of did the Third Man tour. You sort of walk around and do different locations.
Yeah.
It just sort of brings it to life.
Yes, fantastic. And I was going to do a walking tour the year before last, but it got very complex because I couldn't do it until September, and then it rained for all of that September. And then I thought, what do I do?
Yes.
What do I do if everyone, because people were going to come down from London for it. It was pouring. So it got a bit complicated. I'd still like to do that. And there is, as I say, the broadcaster of Whitstable Pearl is Acorn TV. They bring over Americans each summer who do an Acorn TV tour, and they go and visit all the locations used for Acorn TV programmes like Doc Martin, Bridgerton, Yorkshire for vet series, and they are next year going to bring them to Whitstable. So I'd love to do a walking tour. It's really just the logistics of how I do it. And there was a company that contacted me and said that they would like to do it, but they were, I don't know, they were very, aggressively commercial, I thought. And then I thought, I don't want this group of strangers coming to town and upsetting the locals, my neighbours. Because some people said, oh, I don't want to have a great big tour of people outside my house, some of the locations that I've used. So I think you've got to be careful about it. But I thought I would leave that to the broadcaster in the end, let them do it. And I'll just pop up and say hello. Yeah, I might not, at my age now, I might not make it through the whole tour myself. I might need a bit of a buggy.
Is there any room, do you think, in your creative practice, Julie, to maybe explore this sort of side of fantastical absurdism, do you reckon, within what you write in?
Yeah, do you know, I like reading it, but I've never been that interested in writing it. I love science fiction, but I've never been able to write science fiction. I mean, the new book that I've got swirling around in my head has a lot to do with things like telepathy. I'm interested in health and in the way that we work. I'm called a bit of a bogus doctor. I've got my own lot patients that call me up for advice and things like this. I always think I'm a medically untrained doctor, a bogus doctor. And I'm really interested. I mean, Chekhov was fabulous writer, but he was also a doctor. I think the two things go hand in hand, the observation of people psychologically, physiologically. So I'm interested in stuff that happens mentally with people and psychologically, and I'm interested in things to do with introducing that in the new book, but well, Mark, you might like to talk about the horror, you've got a great idea, but you probably can't say what it is now. But he's got a great idea, and I've got to be
Pearl's
strong.
not going to get abducted by a UFO anytime soon. Like
No, well, there is. It's always possible.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, if I get to a final book, I mean, I don't know how many I'm going to be able to do, but say book 12 is the last one that my publishers want me to write, I could actually let loose with everything in that. It could be historical fiction, spy fiction, science fiction, and fantasy horror all in one, couldn't it?
I'll be first in line for that. Yeah. But yeah, to come back to your point, for me, I love fantastical stuff, but you know, I love the films of Ken Loach and Mike Leigh and social realist stuff. I think it all comes down to character. The genre is kind of the set dressing, if you like. But I think the problem a lot of fantasy authors, the mistake they make, and science fiction authors as well, when they're starting out, is they can be obsessed with the world building and the science behind the science fiction or whatever. They get obsessed with that at the cost of character. And I think at the hub of it, what we respond to when we enjoy stories are the characters in the stories and their journey of change and the problems that they have to overcome. That runs through everything, you know, I write. And I mean, people have said to me, have you thought of writing something set in the real world? And I was like, I get enough of the real world as it is. But that said, I've got a couple of things on the boil that are set in the real world, but I still can't help myself. There's still a little bit of fantastical stuff in there as well. So.
I mean, you know, what Mark's just said, I think is the most valuable piece of advice for anyone sitting here who wants to write, really, is character all the time. It doesn't matter. I often say to people, like, you know, students, if I go to talk to students of writing, you can really spend a lot of time on your storyline and you can have the most adventurous scenes there, but if nobody really cares about the character, they don't care if they're hanging off the edge of a cliff top by their fingernails or in an incredibly exciting car chase, because you don't really care about them. Even if you don't like your characters, write a character that people will love to hate. You know, do one or the other, but it's the character that drives your story. And what Mark said is absolutely true. You know, you can have a really exciting piece of fiction set between two characters and a dustbin, you know, theatre of the absurd or whatever, but we have to care about those characters. And when you get lost as well in your own writing and you don't know which way to go, you know, you suddenly got writer's block, keep going back to your characters. Concentrate on your characters, because your characters will always tell you where they want to go.
Absolutely.
And you're just the medium, really.
Yeah. Oh, favourite authors, Julie?
Mark Stay, he's really good.
Stop it.
He's really good. I've always, I mean, I'm a great Dickens fan, so I've always been stuck on that. A few years ago, the Belfast Telegraph asked me to do a piece for them, and one of the questions was that. It was, if you could only choose one book, what would it be? And I thought long and hard about this, you know, because we all love To Kill a Mockingbird and all these wonderful books have been written. It's like choosing your favourite child. But it had to be Great Expectations, you know, because I just thought that book says so much about, you know, social mobility. It spoke to me as a teenager and it speaks to me now, you know, Pip's journey there. So Dickens is always a favourite of mine, but in terms of crime writing, I particularly like a writer, an American writer called Stephen Dobbins. And not many people have heard of him, Dobyns. He writes other books too, but he's actually a poet as well, and he's American. And he's fantastic. He does a series of books called Charlie Bradshaw novels.
Just seeing if they've got them on the shelves. I can't see them.
Charlie Bradshaw, all set around the Saratoga horse racing. He's great. Raymond Chandler. I mean, it could go on. I love Truman Capote. I like a lot of American authors. What about you, Mark?
Well, I was weaned on Douglas Adams, Harry Harrison, Terry Pratchett. More recently, though, Kate Atkinson. I'll read Kate Atkinson, things like Life After Life, and it's like, you'll read sentences like, how did she do that? The endings of her book, and you know, Christopher Priest used to do this as well. You know, you get to the last page and it just turns the entire book on its head. And you look at master storytellers like that and you think, okay, I've still got a long way to go. And you get inspired by them, you know, so it puts fuel in the tank, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for coming. I think we're going to wrap that up. Can you please show your appreciation for Julie Wassmer?